So welcome everyone to the next Earth Science Women's Network event. This time we are focusing on our Careers Beyond Academia series, specifically thinking about nonlinear career pathways. And we're really glad to be joined by two really awesome speakers, Kat Gardner-Vandy from Oklahoma State University and Anna Gold from the University of Colorado Boulder. And they will be presenting a talk today. A bit about what to expect today at the event. So we'll have an event overview for the next few minutes or so, followed by Anna and Kat's presentation, a short moderated Q&A, very, very short break as we close out from the talk, and then a small group discussion time where you'll be able to ask Anna and Kat questions about their talk and anything else you would like to know about nonlinear career pathways. And so this is an Earth Science Women's Network hosted event with speakers from different places, from different organizations. A bit of housekeeping, so please remember to abide by ESWN's Code of Conduct. You should have signed this upon registering, but if you found yourself here without having signed that, please take a moment to go to our website and have a read of it. All aspects of this event, except for the small group discussion, will be recorded for those who can't join us live. You can also rename yourself if you'd like to. So most of you are called ESWN event attendee. You can rename yourself with your name, or you can stay anonymous. This event is also fully closed captioned, and you can activate the captions using the little CC button at the bottom of your screen. You'll be muted for the duration of the event. You shouldn't be able to unmute yourself, but if you find that you can, please remember to not unmute yourself so that we can maintain a nice quiet environment for our speakers. You can also send your questions via the chat to the questions at ESWN host. And remember to share your thoughts in the chat as the event progresses. So we're all virtual, and it's always great to hear what people are thinking as our events go by. If you have any tech issues, please also send these to the questions host. So a bit about the Earth Science Women's Network if you've not heard of us before. So ESWN is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing diversity across the geosciences, with an emphasis on creating and supporting a nurturing community, working for cultural change to eliminate barriers to a diverse scientific workforce, and empowering scientists through professional development. And we chose to host this specific event because there's so many careers beyond academia. You can do so much with your science background. And it can really make a difference and take you to lots of different places. Also, so we know that career pathways aren't straight lines, and we basically want to show you that it's completely normal to have these career pathways, and you should be proud of it if you've got one. We're a group of 4 that organize this webinar series, and we'll each introduce ourselves in turn. So I will hand over to Anna.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anna Klejcik-Constantino. I am a water resources engineer. I work on habitat restoration projects on the west coast of the US.
So hi, my name is Rayma. I currently serve as the co-chair of the ESWN Professional Development and Networking Committee, which is formerly known as Member Events. And I am currently adventuring in the world of UK research councils.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alana Pollock. I am a research scientist at the University of Colorado Boulder in the Cooperative Institute for Research in the Environmental Sciences, and I work at the NOAA Chemical Sciences Laboratory. My field is air quality research and making measurements from airborne atmospheric research platforms.
And I'm going to introduce Katie, who's not with us today. She is an education outreach associate at CIRES and University of Colorado.
And now it's our great pleasure to introduce our 2 panelists. So we have Anna Gold, who's the director for the Center for Education, Engagement and Evaluation, and Kat Gardner-Vandy, who's an assistant professor of aviation and space at Oklahoma State University. And with that, we will hand over to Anna and Kat for their talk.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We are very grateful today to have been asked to chat with you all about this model of STEM workforce development that we are very passionate about, and tell you a little bit about this paper that we wrote, and then some of the ways in which this applies to having non-linear career paths. Yes, just a further introduction of ourselves. Halito, that's hello in Choctaw. My name is Kat. And a little bit about my background within the earth sciences. My bachelor's degree is in geology, and so I really enjoy studying rocks themselves and hand sample, and that led me to pursue a PhD in planetary sciences, and I study meteorites. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Thanks, Kat. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anna Gold. As you heard already, I'm at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I'm directing the Center for Education Engagement and Evaluation. I'm affiliated with the Education School of Education here, but I'm research faculty, and I'm also a fellow at the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences. And we'll tell you a little bit more about the background that in our journeys later in our talk. But that's two of us. Of the author list here, Beck Batchelor is the lead author, but you also see there's a handful of other people that co-authored this paper with us in EOS in 2021. And we wanted to just highlight that there's a diversity of perspectives and voices and career path all fed together. And we spent some time really workshopping this paper together, and we are presenting here on behalf of the whole author team. You can find the link and the QR code here. All right. So what are we doing here today? We are just a few of the goals that we have for these next 30 minutes that we'll present to you. We'll be kicking off this series of careers beyond academia by providing an alternative analogy for career path, and we'll explore that a little bit more. So we'll go into the traditional model for career path, and then talk about the more holistic and inclusive model that we put forth in this paper. We'll talk a little bit about applications, and we saw that there's a lot of questions in the Miro board that had specific questions about, unique situations in a non-alternative or non-linear career path, and we'll give you some examples, and then we'll also dive into a few case studies. So you've all seen, this is like 4 pictures, but there are so many out there about the pipeline career paths. But I wanted to just step back and have you all think about when you were a child, what were you thinking you might want to be? Kind of what was your dream? What is the job that you thought you might do down the road? And then think about, and maybe the job that you wanted back then, what does it look like now? Or when you think about the job you have currently, did that exist even when you were a child, or did you know about it? So, and maybe then just see, is there a linear path you can draw? And for me, the answer is no, but that might be different for everyone here. But just think a little bit about your own career path and the journey that you've taken. And we are excited to discuss some of those implications in this path. So in this modern world, our parents used to train for something, and then they had a job, and it was really not that common to change jobs too many times. And a lot of us have already had a variety of different jobs. So there is a modern, new world of careers out there. And somehow some of these models to think about careers and these analogies have not really caught up with this. And so as you can see here, one of the very typical things that people use to talk about career path is this pipeline, which we propose is outdated. This very linear model has so many problems, including leaks, and that once you are not and having just one entry point, and that once you're not making it into that pipeline, you're kind of left out because the pipeline is closed. So I wanted to just point out what the flaws are with the metaphor, and then I'll set Kat up with talking about our model. And I want to really make 3 different points. So first of all, if you think about the career as a pipeline, it paints this picture of a linear pathway that's desirable. That's the one path that's you enter at some way and it spits you out being a scientist or whatever this pipeline might lead you, and that you're kind of advancing at a very constant rate, and there's not really a way to stop because everything is flowing, keeps flowing, to have like these wiggles and detours that a lot of us probably, when as you reflected on your own career path, might have experienced. And it also implies that there's one way that where you spit out, that's the desirable job you go to. The other point, of course, is what happens to the leaks? All those people that start, that career, maybe that was the dream when you left high school, or we left high school saying, oh, I want to be a scientist, but down the road, something happens, life or changes in priorities. If you leave that pipeline, you are gone, you're a leak, and that there are actual people that are leaking out of these pipelines. And are these not as good? Are these lesser life choices, lesser career path? That's kind of implied that you are not making it through the pipeline. And what does that imply? And then lastly, the pipeline model really implies that there maybe STEM is just not as supportive for all these people that have slightly alternative career paths. There is, especially for marginalized identities or people that have a variety of different life circumstances, or just don't know at the beginning of early 20s what they want to do, that there's not a very supportive environment, because unless you make it through the pipeline, you're not spit out at the end as the scientist. So we want to propose something that's more holistic and that really builds on this more inclusive ecosystem that thrives and even celebrates those people that are taking their own career path. And next slide, and I'm passing off to Kat.
Right. I appreciate that, Anna. Okay, so this is a beautiful figure that came from our article that we have. I put the link into the chat, but then you can also go to the QR code here. So I want to sort of park here for a minute and take a look at this graphic, and I'll do some describing, but then we can chat about what some of the implications are for this. So if you see, we have a braided river system. And we have at the top, we have all of our multiple entry and exits that come in. So we have our entry points of informal STEM experiences and K-12 education. But you see those entering very quickly into channels of various sizes that are potentially a 4-year college, say a 2-year community college, perhaps it's a technical school or some kind of training. And then those channels continue on, and they braid into each other. They become larger, some become smaller as we enter into different types of programs, potentially a graduate program, potentially an REU, perhaps an internship program. You might have some channels that go towards education. You might become a teacher and do some of those different things. You might also have industry channels that intersect at different places. Those channels continue on into the greater large STEM workforce ecosystem by means of potentially graduate school, postgraduate programs like postdocs, professional careers, more industry careers and professional development, and those widen and become part of the, what we might say, the ocean of the STEM workforce as a whole. So a few things that I would like to point out about this system are those multiple entry and exit points. As Anna was talking about the pipeline model, we really do just think about one entry point, but it's really important that in the braided river system, we have multiple entry points. We have water coming in, if we want to think about it geologically, we have water coming in from groundwater, we have water coming in from other channels, we have precipitation of various varieties, you have all these different entry points for that system, and all are equally valid and trusted in perfectly wonderful ways to enter into the system. I'll call out here specifically not only the K-12 education part, but the informal STEM experience part. We, maybe even those of us on, on this call right now had various camps or after-school programming or programming from a museum or library that we went to that really did have an instrumental part of forming that identity that we had as a scientist. So that's in addition to the K-12 education experiences that we have. Likewise, we love how this model brings to bear the fact that a four-year institution is not the only way to be part of the STEM workforce development. It gives equal value to two-year colleges and technical colleges because those folks will have a different type of skill set that goes into the greater STEM ecosystem. I'll also point out that there are different channels of different sizes. So I mentioned, different things like internships and grad programs and teaching, perhaps. We have folks that will maybe take some time to do some teaching activities. And those are all equally important in this STEM ecosystem. Another one of the pieces that I like to highlight, because in particular, it's one that I'm very passionate about, are these little places where the river itself will slow down. Part of the definition, the geological definition of a braided river, is that we have some places where we have sedimentation, we have a slowing of the channel, and sometimes we have the channel stopping altogether. That is part of the braided river ecosystem. I'm really passionate about these little stops, and here we have a beaver dam because there is going to be a point in our career where we either need to slow down or we need to stop. And those things happen for a variety of reasons. Anna and I will be discussing some of those specifically for our own lives in a few slides, but some options for these are, say you decide that you want to go join the Peace Corps and you're going to go for a few years and say, exit, in quotations, exit the greater science workforce, but you're going to do something else that's equally important to you and is still integrated within STEM. Say you served in the military. Say you make a choice to start a family or be a caregiver for someone in your family. Those are all different either slow down or stopping points that are part of our life. These are things that happen because we are human beings that live in a relational world, and it is a very valid and wonderful, I would argue, way to develop your career during that slowdown period. All right, looking a little bit further, as I mentioned, going into this greater STEM workforce of the ocean, we have all of these different career paths that you could take. Industry partners are just as important within the STEM ecosystem as becoming a tenure track faculty member somewhere. When I was a grad student, this really seemed like the only way to really become part of the greater planetary science community was to become a tenure track faculty member. But it's really important to keep in mind that our industry professionals, as well as education professionals and so on, play just as great a role as faculty members at a university. Okay, next slide, please. I think I may have jumped on myself here because this is just going to bring up some of these key points here. So we talked about those multiple entry points. We talked about how all of these different pathways are connected. And that is one of the great pieces of the braided river, is that everything is in communication with one another. Everything is in relation with one another. A point here is that you can enter and exit the braided river model multiple times. A parcel of water that is following along this braided river is going to see many different things, and that is a neutral statement. So entering and exiting and entering again is just a neutral part of the way in which the river flows. The river itself is very adaptable and responsive. It can incorporate different parts of that water in the flow just as part of its movement through the system. And overall, the braided river model is a very inclusive ecosystem. It allows for different cultural perspectives. It allows for different types of folks who have different things that they find important. And it sees all of those different ways to integrate into the system as equally valid. All right, Anna, I'm going to hand it over to you again.
Yeah, thank you. You hopefully recognize some of your own career path there. We want to just step back a little bit and say, what are the implications for the workforce and workforce development? I'm sure there's various people in different positionalities on this call that could influence or even, contribute, just thinking about how do we change the systems to really implement this more inclusive approach to careers. So here are just a few ideas that I would put out here. I'm excited to discuss some of those in our presentation. So let's start with educational institutions. And so how can educational institutions encourage the development of support systems that recognize these different learning pathways and career opportunities? There's, when you start really early, there's various career exploration programs. Sometimes when you were maybe thinking back in this little activity I did initially, maybe people don't even know about ways you can engage with the STEM workforce. So middle, high school, there are fantastic opportunities to provide exploration programs of careers, shadowing, things like that. There's also bridge programs that universities or higher education programs can do to help with maybe fill in some gaps that exist to make sure students are successful where as they enter, or if somebody had taken a detour, had kind of hit one of these sedimentation slowdowns, how do you get back up to speed and get ready to enter this more faster flowing braided river system? Industry partnerships to, again, shadow at various parts or opportunities to exit and come back to the workforce. You've probably all seen that some of the funding organization like NSF now offers industry partnerships that are funded where a student can exit and come back. So things like that are really helpful to facilitate and also provide the resources that are necessary to make it happen. But it's also so often it's about not knowing about these opportunities. But then also multi-level mentorship, different scholarship opportunities, support for transfer, especially when we think about K-12, when you come to a four-year college, there's a lot of imposter phenomena, not belonging, or maybe not having, started with a core and not feeling like a belonging. So universities can do a lot to support the transfer. Kat and I both talked about the culture of belonging, that it just feels accepted, and it's like these career paths are exciting, and there's assets that everyone brings, not just those that shot down the middle and the center of the braided river, but building that out in the departments really allows people to feel like they belong and want to participate, and then building relationships with various communities to encourage participation in the STEM force throughout, and build, kind of show the path and build those. Employers, just to put it out there, there's hiring practices that could be employers, university employers thinking about, tenure track processes, but also hiring in industry to acknowledge that these pathways are actually have a benefit and are just part of the pathways. What can policymakers do? And there's like a few of the screenshots you see over on the side. So much of this comes down to financial support. We all know that, especially in the US, financially, there's a lot of socioeconomic barriers to participating in the traditional four-year college path. So if there's any way that policymakers can help lower some of those socioeconomic barriers, that's going to be really helpful to build this more inclusive workforce that we propose in this model. Great. We will both, Kat and I will give you just a little example of our rivers and our own journey, and we can circle back on this. I'm going to start here since I'm talking already. So thinking back of where my beavers and bridges were throughout my river and my career path, I actually was really stressed about finding a job that would give me, a job that would pay the bills. So I was like, well, I'll do physical therapy school. And you can hear I have an accent. I grew up in Germany, and that is a different model for physical therapy. So that's what I did after school. And very very quickly I saw that's not my path. And I'd always had a passion for science, but I didn't actually know what a scientist would do. And I thought, well, it's just, I just do science, but what do I do later with this? And there's like, anyway, lots of barriers in my mind that it wasn't even an option. And I had no visual what this could look like. But then I kind of found my footing, talked to people. I actually worked in the Arctic for various summers as a tour guide in an Arctic environment because I love the Arctic. And then I met more people that were scientists and they're like, oh, you can do this. And so I went to school and I got a German diploma in geography. And then I did a master's in Salzburg in Austria, an online master's in GIS, because again, I was so stressed about finding a real job where I was like, well, GIS, I can probably pay bills with that. And then people were like, no, 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 don't worry about this. You should just focus on the science. So I felt like my career path looks more linear than it felt. I was always kind of tug and pull between these different ideas. And then I did a postdoc and in Canada, and I got a really good scholarship, and I was so unhappy because all of a sudden I didn't have to do all this teaching. I didn't do all these other cool things that I got to do in my graduate work, and I was just focusing on the science. And I was like, oh no, I mean, I'm going to be writing this really niche paper about the one small research question that nobody really cares about. And I want to care. I want to engage with people. I want this science to be meaningful. So I was like, oh, wait a second, I need to stop here. And then I was like, I'm going to leave science. This is not for me. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I've invested 10 years of my life, done all this work and done all these little hurdles. And so I went to work for the German Alpine Service. I was a program manager there. And then I was like, oh, I missed the science. What do I do? How do I get back? And then I had a kid and I was like, oh, I want to go back, but now I have a kid, it's even harder. So I actually moved back to the US with my family and went to the University of Colorado, but I didn't do a formal career track professor trajectory. I became first like a program manager in an education program, and eventually I worked my way up to do more research and education, and I felt like that was where I could make a contribution. So that's kind of a winding path, and I especially showing all these like where I was really pulled between the pipeline and what I wanted to do was really tricky, but I'm so happy where I'm right now. And we'll hear from Kat.
Yes, thank you, Anna. That was great. I have tried my best. It's very complicated. I think Anna and I are learning to try to articulate, visually what this river looks like, but Anna did a great job. So I'll try to explain mine as well. So I was definitely, the sort of quintessential kid that always loved space and wanted to be an astronaut. And so just tried to do everything that I could to do what I thought, that the world wanted me to do in terms of getting to that path. So at the time, it was definitely the pipeline sort of model. So I thought, okay, I've got to do a science undergraduate career. I needed to get a PhD. I need to do this and that and try to do what I can to work for NASA and maybe be an astronaut someday. So I went to the University of Oklahoma, which is just a couple hours where I am from in Tulsa, Oklahoma. To do a degree in geology. And then my only thought as an undergraduate student was that I needed to do as many NASA internships as I could because I just really wanted to work for NASA. So I did all these NASA internships and tried to make it really help myself get into a good graduate school program. And along the way, I was just so laser focused. I did not want to have a family. I didn't care about getting married. I just was laser focused on trying to become a planetary scientist and an astronaut. So I decided at that time to go get my PhD in planetary sciences, and then I moved to Tucson, Arizona, which was my very first time to ever move away from Oklahoma. So that was a very big shift for me. And this was kind of where things started getting a little interconnected, a little shifty, and shifty in a good way, by the way. And then where some of my beaver dams started getting built in the slowdowns, because it was at this time that I realized, oh, I want to have a life too. I want to have, these other aspects of my life. And so in grad school, it was a huge transitionary time for me. I went from getting married. I got married in this time. And then I also was really struggling with the concept of when to start a family. So while I was a graduate student, I spent a lot of time interviewing women for the Women in Planetary Science blog, which I highly recommend. They're just a bunch of great interviews that you can go read of various women across all different stages and jobs within planetary sciences. And as I was interviewing some of the women for this, they kind of had the same theme, which was that and actually Renu Malhotra, she's a professor at University of Arizona. She said something really profound to me, and that was that there's a narrative that there's never a good time to have children. And she switched the narrative for herself and said, there's never a bad time to have children. You make it work. If you would like to have a family and you want to incorporate that into your life as a scientist, you work with your partner and develop those ways. And so I took that home to my husband and said, what should we do? And he said, well, let's start our family. And so I actually had our first child while I was a graduate student. So I was in the laboratory full time. We're doing experiments and I was pregnant, then had him. And then I was actually pregnant with our second child when I defended my dissertation and then graduated. And so that just sort of set the stage for me that my family would be incorporated into everything that I did. So we moved both of our children to DC, where I did a postdoc at the Smithsonian and worked in an environment that was very family friendly. And we can chat about that kind of environment more in the Q&A if you like. But it was around this time that, surprise, my husband and I had been both applying for jobs. I had applied for some tenure track positions at places, not really convinced of what I wanted to do. But my husband had remarked that it was really difficult to raise a family in a big city like Washington, D.C., and he really wanted to go back to where my family is in Tulsa. So we were planning a move back to Tulsa, and I thought, I just can't really do planetary science in Oklahoma. There's not a whole lot happening there. So maybe I'm not going to be a scientist anymore, and I felt kind of resigned to that, but I wanted to spend more time with my children. And the surprise part came when I didn't know that I was pregnant with twins at that time. So this is really where the biggest beaver dam in my life has been, the most wonderful as well, because I found out about this twin pregnancy and it was very high risk. And so I started needing to spend, nearly 100% of my time resting or being at a doctor's appointment. And so I thought, well, now I'm really never going to be a scientist because this is just having 4 children is not going to be compatible with that. But over time, when we had identical twin boys, when they were old enough, I said, wait, I was ready for them to have a place to go during the day and go to school for a few days a week. And I was ready myself. And so I eased myself back into doing work. And I got a part-time job at a community college doing work with high school students who were enrolled at the community college. And that was a wonderful way for me to have this sort of slow movement of my channel back into the larger flow of the river. And then I also came to realize that a university very near to me, Oklahoma State, has a program called Aviation in Space. And while there are no planetary scientists doing work at Oklahoma State, I realized that they did a ton of work in space education. Likewise, I have my pilot's license and I'm really, really passionate about aviation. So it became a really, really perfect fit for me. I did start at Oklahoma State as an adjunct professor, then quickly realized how much I loved it there. So I decided to become a teaching assistant professor, which is not on the tenure track. I never had thought about being a tenure track professor until I went to Oklahoma State and realized I actually really like the way they do things there. And so then I was able to join the tenure track about a year later. So there was definitely this morphing and changing over time of what I thought possible, and then how I would incorporate my family into all those things. So today, I still get to do some planetary science and meteorite work, but I do a lot of education work. I'm a PI for a NASA Science Activation Program, and so I get to work with my nation, Choctaw Nation, and some other nations within Oklahoma to do a variety of different things. So I'm really grateful for all the different varied opportunities that I have.
Awesome. So we'll wrap up our presentation here, just talking a little bit about some of the systematic barriers. We'll keep it all pretty short. I just wanted to, I already flagged socioeconomic barriers exist, but also cultural barriers and like, lack of vision barriers. You've heard this both for Kat and I, that we thought we were stuck, but getting yourself unstuck is something that where cultural barriers really come in or visionary barriers.
Yes, another great discussion point that we've talked about frequently, in the greater conversation of the braided river is, what does it mean to be successful? And I think this is a key point as we talk about transitioning our minds from a pipeline model into a braided river type of model, is from an administrative standpoint, from institutions, what is the definition of success? In the braided river model, you can be a parcel of water that enters and exits very quickly, but your contribution still mattered. So you may have not made it down to the ocean. You may have done something else, but you've moved on to another water system that has been, you've done something else successful there. So this is really a broader conversation that I encourage everyone to have in your own mind. What does it mean for yourself to be successful? And then in some of the communities that you're in. Most specifically, I want to call out administrators and above, maybe those at government funding agencies, to really think about what success actually means. Just a few words here about the implementation strategies. I know Anna has touched on this. Multi-level mentorship programs are so important. When we think about mentorship, sometimes we think about younger folks being mentored by older folks, but there is so much in that mid-level where we can mentor each other. Likewise, those who are, say, program managers and so on need mentors as well. And so we can all really learn from each other. And that is really something that is highlighted in the braided river model. All right, I just wanted to leave you all here with this some beautiful statements from a wonderful poet, Alice Walker. The statement on the left says, "What is a river but a multitude of little streams?" And I really love this sentiment because we are the beautiful puzzle of our life is just an accumulation of all these little pieces and how they fit together. I also want to leave you here with this poem. This poem is very short. It says, "When you see water in a stream, you say, oh, this is stream water. When you see water in a river, you say, oh, this is water of the river. When you see ocean water, you say, this is the ocean's water. But actually, water is always only itself and does not belong to any of these containers, though it creates them. And so it is with you." And I will leave you with that. Yakoki, thank you for your attention today.
Very moving. Thank you both so much for sharing your stories and giving us that context on the work that's captured in your paper. We're gonna shift into a short Q&A session with kind of some summary questions from those that were submitted by the attendees. And then hopefully everyone can hang on for the end of the talk where you can ask questions directly to our incredible panelists. And if you do have questions, you can start popping them in the chat. So the first kind of summary question, we received a lot of questions and kind of concerns from people about handling uncertainty and kind of evaluating the trade-offs when you're at these junctions in the system, right? Which path do I take? Which is, best for me right now? So I wonder if you could, and then also going back to this kind of these mental barriers that we create for ourselves, right? So what do you recommend for constructive approaches to, handling trade-offs or choosing which path to take at an instance?
Anna, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. One of the things that I, when you thinking back to my own career path, the hardest slowdown where I was felt so stuck was when I was deciding from this really prestigious postdoc that I was going to just give up science. And even writing applications, I was like, I don't know, I did 10 years of science. I'm not good for anything. And I had this friend of mine who was totally giving me this pep talk and saying, think about transferable skills that you have. You learn so much in science and it's transferable to whatever you want to do because you learned to just be, a good professional. And it doesn't mean you have to do the same thing you've done before. So I feel like this getting unstuck. So two aspects in this I think were really helpful for me, kind of changing my mindset to acknowledging the things I've done, how they transfer, but also having somebody that helped me and mentored me and said, it's okay. You know, it doesn't mean you failed. And it means that you are seeking something else and follow your heart. So I think these two things are really important. And I could feel that when my heart wasn't in the science, I wasn't doing the best work I could. And I feel like now I'm so inspired because I'm where I'm really happy. And so follow your heart in this, and it's going to be hard. And look for some mentors that help you are ways that I would answer this question.
Wonderful. Thank you. Kat, do you have anything to add on that?
Sure, I agree 100%. I think everything that Anna said is spot on for my life as well. I think one thing I always think of when it came to like this time of me doing grad school and postdoc and deciding some of these same things, and all of us, you know, having like sort of this science mindset about stuff, is make some lists. And that always helped me to really write things down. Like, what are my passions? Like, notwithstanding the rest of the planet, like what are the things that I will just always be passionate about? And then likewise, what are my values? So, you know, at the end of my life, what I want to say that I had done, you know, what are those things that I really want to make sure that I keep finding important and making time for? And that really was something that was able to sort of guide my ship, so to speak, was to say, you know, it's really important for me to do X. So what can I do to make sure that that happens? And, you know, it doesn't matter that someone else would think of that as being a quote unquote failure. It's important to me. And so at the end of the day, that was really a guiding force.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. The second question that we have is, yes, kind of talking, you've already touched on this a little bit, about skills that folks can think about building that are more related to career resilience. And like you were talking about those transferable skills, Anna, skills that transcend a particular discipline or workplace. Because I think people want kind of examples of what they want to be building if they're anticipating a meander or a slowdown or a, you know, faster pace ahead.
Kat, you want to start with this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny to me, you know, funny, interesting, not funny, haha, but funny, interesting to me how so many times I'll be working in what I think is a different part of academia or a different, you know, whole different topic within aviation as opposed to planetary science. And I will keep hearkening back to things that I did in research, you know, when I was an undergrad. And so I think we need to make sure we're not limiting ourselves with where those transferable skills can come from, because they're there, you know, they're all things that we have learned and they're ingrained within us. I think one that's really transferable that I've noticed over time is some of those really foundational science pieces, like even though, so I did cosmochemistry, which is looking, you know, it's like kind of like geochemistry for meteorites. And a lot of those same chemical principles transfer over into aviation. I didn't realize how much I knew about aviation fuels and different types of these topics just because I knew all about the chemistry from the geochemical standpoint. And some of the same instruments that would have been used, that I would have used in grad school to study, you know, the geochemistry of some of these rocks, we can use those in other sectors. We can use those in different things. So different types of equipment, even if you haven't used that equipment, but the theory behind those, you understand. And so that's very transferable. Likewise, different ways like that I've manipulated data in the past and worked with different types of data sets. You know, I may not work with that exact data set anymore, but the ways in which I did that has been interesting to come back consistently in my career.
Thanks, Kat. I was actually thinking in a slightly different way with this question, so I'll give you a different spin on this answer. One of the things that is, you know, as a scientist, you have to write because that's kind of the currency. It's the papers, but try to write a variety of different papers. You know, try to write an op-ed, try to write maybe an EOS article. Some of those slightly different ways of communicating and kind of broaden, or even social media post or a blog post, and kind of diversify a little bit of the skills. And it's still, if you're still in science, but you're looking to do something different, just try out what you can on the margins of science. And or if you write a proposal, yes, it's nice to write a lot of NSF proposals, but try to write a proposal more maybe for another funding agency or a different philanthropic funder or something that's non-traditional. And I think you can, while you're still achieving all the goals, and in some ways probably even better, because you are broadening a little bit and not and communicating to various audiences. Try to broaden your skill set out, and then you have something you can fall back to. One of the things that I struggled with when I was writing applications, I told you already, one of the things was really stuck in my mind, that I couldn't talk about my skill set in transferable ways, which I think is really something we all can learn, because there's so much transferable, like we both said. But then if you've written for different audience, for example, and you want to go maybe in science communication, you can say, oh, I've already written, yes, I know how to write science papers, but I also know how to write these other papers. So I think there's a lot of these kind of looking at the things you're doing and figuring out what are alternative slight spins to what I do that get me slightly broaden my river path here, so that you can build some of those skill sets. But then I think it's slightly off this question, but I do a lot of interviewing right now, because we hire a lot of people, and it's so interesting to sit on the other end of the interviews and see how people talk about their own life and the skills they bring. And I think that is something that everyone can do. It's pretty easy. You just need to find somebody to help you think creatively how you can spin the things you've done in a way that is not is truthful, but it just helps you rethink a little bit the way you are framing yourselves.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. We're going to transition now into about a 3-minute break. So have a sip of water, folks, take an eye break, and then we'll come back and have a Q&A with our amazing panelists. Thank you.